My mother always said to me, the biggest certainty in life is uncertainty. You should be questioning, who am I? Where do I want to be? What do I want to do? I was excited about traveling. I want to go see the world. I was quite shy. I didn't have a high self-esteem. And in the beginning, you go, you travel, you have fun, you go out, you meet people. You see so many people struggling. It can be emotional and it will be challenging. Sometimes you are lonely. Who I was 4 years ago is a completely different person to who I am now. Within 5 minutes, we said, yep, let's hire the motorbike and we're going 1,000 kilometers across the country. And I think to myself, shit, it's not the place that you go to, but it is the people that you meet that is the most rewarding. I feel very proud of who I am. And that was because of the traveling. And for me, it has been the best experience of my life.
Welcome to the SAFAROTO podcast. Today I am excited to be having a conversation with somebody that I met in June of 2020. I spent a year traveling in Australia. We spent a few months together in the northeast corner of Australia in Cairns. About a year later, so exactly 2 years ago this month, we reconnected in Istanbul, and over the last 3 years we spent months together. I've actually went back and I checked. We've been to 18 countries together over the last 3 years. We have climbed Kilimanjaro, we've hiked in Patagonia, through the Inca Trail in Peru. We have we've ridden motorcycles in the Himalayas. We have spent time on islands from Bali to Sri Lanka to the Maldives. We have spent numerous hours cooking together, laughing, dancing, going out. We've explored places together from Istanbul to Cairo to Marrakesh. And I'm excited to be sitting with him today. He's been traveling for 3 years. And we are now in Colombia together. And I want to take the time to reflect back on his journey over the last 2 years, learn more about him, and hopefully share some insights about the travel lifestyle and some of the advice he may have for others wanting to travel. So, welcome, Pavel.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share my experience.
Pavel is your name. I often call you Pablito. So, who is Pablito?
I guess Pablito is that Latin flavor inside me that was always curious to explore this culture, which is why I've spent so much time in Latin America. I've always felt comfortable and at home here, and I've always enjoyed meeting people. But for me, traveling was never about going from hostel to hostel and meeting people from my culture. It was always about meeting people from different cultures and having a better understanding of what life is like outside of Sydney, where I grew up. I feel like a lot of people have experienced living in a bubble, and it's very easy to get caught into a bubble. You finish high school, you go to university, you get a job, you start a family, and before you know it, 50 years go by, and you ask yourself, what is life like outside of my bubble?
So you mentioned when you started traveling, you left Sydney.
Correct.
And so talk to me about what it was like growing up in Sydney, and what is it in your upbringing, in your life experience that has led you to the point in December of 2021 to just go travel the world full time?
I think I have to go a little bit more back in time, because my mother was a very big influence on me in terms of traveling and seeing the world. My mother grew up in communist Poland in the 1980s, where there were very little resources. And this is a post-war mentality and a post-war family. So she had this curiosity to see the world, see what is outside of her bubble. And she spoke about this, and she took me around the world when I was young. So I was very lucky enough to experience this because of her. And I believe that was a very big influence on me. But unfortunately, there were 2018 and 2019 and 2020 was a very difficult year for me. There were a lot of difficult experiences to go through. And at that point, I realized that I wanted to experience life outside of the corporate world, especially with what was going on with my family. I thought to myself, at the end of my life, what will I regret more? And what kind of experiences do I want to have? You look at the city, people spend their weekends consuming things, buying things. For me, I prefer experiences. And that's something that's important for me. Because the memories that I create, the people that I meet, that's something that will last a lifetime. Versus that material object, it has an expiry date and it has no value to me. So I ask myself, what adds value to my life? And that is important for me, to keep adding value to my life and the people around me. And through traveling, I've had all of these experiences to be able to share, to understand the way people think, the way they behave, and how people think differently within different countries because of the cultures and the upbringing that they have. And that gives you a very good perspective and gives you a lot of empathy for the world. A lot of people get caught up into their problems. Everybody has a problem.
So you're looking at all these people in Sydney who are living a certain lifestyle. You're wanting to go explore the world, have other experiences.
Correct. I guess for me, I just saw a lot of sad people in a big city. A lot of people wanting to have a different life, but not knowing what that different life looks like. And there comes a point in every person's life where they need to leave the home. And they need to be able to understand who they are and what they want. Around that point of 18, your parents start to tell you, you should do this, you should do that. And at the end of the day, it's your choice and your decision. And just like when we did Vipassana, we removed all of these distractions. By the way, Vipassana is a 10-day meditation of silence, which we both had completed in separate times of our lives.
Technically, I've only done 5 days of meditation in Thailand, so I do have to go back and experience the 10-day Vipassana.
So I did the 10-day Vipassana, and it's important to block out all of these voices and listen to your inner voice. And when you travel, it can get lonely. And a lot of people, when they travel, they want to go to hostels, they want to party, they want to have fun, and that's great, it's part of the experience. But it's a lot more than that. It's about spending time on your own and spending time to reflect. And traveling gives you that because you have no distractions. You're not in your past. You're in your present. You're in this moment. And you're reflecting upon where you want to move. It's important to understand where you come from, but it's important not to identify with your past, because you have a future that is full of possibilities. And so many people get caught up or feel like they're stuck in their choices, but who you are, who I was 4 years ago, is a completely different person to who I am now. I was a very anxious kid. I had a lot of emotions. I was a very sensitive kid. And through these experiences, I've come to terms with who I am. And I've also become very content with who I am, very proud of who I am through these experiences. And it really only comes with traveling. And the reason is, if you live in a bubble, you will always live in that bubble. And you will never see what life is like outside of your childhood, what people tell you to do, and what you think you want to do. You think, okay, everyone tells you, go to university, get a job, because that's what you're meant to do. But you have to question everything in your life. You have to question every decision that you make, because every decision you have has a consequence. And traveling has been extremely important for me because it gave me a lot of time to reflect, just like my time in Vipassana. And I think that's the key point. Traveling is an opportunity to reflect on who you are, your experiences. And again, the parties, the fun, it's all part of the process, just as much as spending time on your own, walking through the streets, going climbing mountains, nature, cities, really understanding what you like and what you want to do, and adding more value to your life. For example, through this experience, I was able to pick up another language. Now I feel very proficient in Spanish, and I'm able to communicate with people in their local language. And this is a beautiful experience because if you go travel and you just go to a hostel, you're still in a bubble. Let's say you're from the United States or from Europe or from Australia, and you want to go through Latin America and you start traveling through hostels. Well, yes, you do meet a lot of people from your culture, which is great. But I urge people to also step out of that and see what life is like as a local, because it really gives you a lot of perspective. And in my opinion, it has been an extremely valuable experience. That is my personal feedback, and I am grateful for that.
When you decided to go traveling, how did you decide about where to go, and what were you looking for when you were thinking about the destinations you wanted to go to?
Well, intuitively, there was always a part of me that wanted to visit Latin America. It's not something that I can explain or articulate, but it's a place that was on the other side of the world. And I think what I was looking for is the opposite of my upbringing. You know, it's human nature to think that the grass is greener on the other side. And so, for example, if I go back to my mother, she was brought up in communist Poland. And her dream was to go to Australia because it was this mysterious, far, remote world full of, what's the word that I'm looking for, I guess, full of adventure, full of excitement, and something that was unique. And I believed that at the time, Latin America was that place, because a lot of Australians like to go to Europe, a lot of Australians like to go to Asia, and I just didn't want to be another Australian backpacker that is only meeting other Australian backpackers or other Europeans. And our first destination was Brazil. And it had a huge impact on my life because there are not many foreigners that go to travel in Brazil. It's more local tourism, people from Argentina, Chile, around Latin America. So you don't have this influence of Western culture. And I was looking for that at the time because I was curious to see what life was like on the other side, similar to Africa. I was always curious to visit Africa, again, because it was so far removed from how I was raised, from my upbringing. To certain extents, Asia as well, India. India was another country, again, because it was such a unique country to visit. And for the most part, when people think about traveling, they think about Europe, at least as I was growing up. My first international trip with my friends was at 19. But I did the classic Euro trip. You know, friends from high school, going out, partying, but it felt very empty. It felt like I was getting no value out of that. It felt like I was just basically doing the same thing in Sydney, but I was in another country. And yes, when you're 19, it's a lot of fun. But as you get older, at least for me, I was looking to add more value into my life. Add more experiences so that I can get a better perspective for how the world works. I've always been a very empathetic human being. And with that, I've been able to understand different cultures, and that gave me a lot of value. That was a personal choice. That was what I was looking for. But everybody has to make that choice in terms of what they look for. And I believe that it's important to also set your intention before you travel, And then every couple of months, reflect on your experiences to see if you are really getting what you want out of this experience. And again, for me, it's about adding value to my life and the people around me, getting a different perspective, but also getting out of that bubble. I didn't want to live in a bubble where everything was, planned. I wanted to expect the unexpected. My mother always said to me, the biggest certainty in life is uncertainty. And there's some beauty in that as well. And people spend their lives trying to plan. You finish high school. Okay, I'm going to go to university. I'm going to go get a job. I'm going to get a profession. I'm going to go make money. I want to start a family. But during that time, you have to ask yourself, when did you stop and think, is it really what I want?
So you had this desire to go explore, see the world, but traveling full time is not free.
No.
And so the question is, how can you afford it? How does it work financially? How do you manage your budget? How do you earn an income while being able to go from one country to the other and being able to see so many countries over the last few years?
Well, the way I see it, there's a couple of ways to do it. The way I did it, from a young age, I've always aspired to be an entrepreneur. For me, the most important thing is not money. It's freedom. But money gives you the key to freedom. So before traveling, I thought to myself, like I said, I did my Euro trip when I was 19, and I loved it. And I realized that I wanted to continue doing that. But I need to make an income. Like you said, traveling is not cheap. So the way I did it was to build a startup, start my own business. Now, that is an extremely difficult way to do it. Just to put it into perspective, when I started my own business, I was 23. And I started traveling when I was about 26, 27, give or take. So it took a number of years to prepare for that. And you do need to be patient. You do need to plan. But starting a business is also not a very difficult experience, not a difficult experience. It requires discipline. And in all of this, there's a lot of discipline that is required. Another way to do it is to find a remote job, which is very, very common. And you'll find different co-working communities, a lot of people that work remotely, and you can find yourself a job maybe in the US or in Europe, where where they have the option to work remotely and you can travel. But also you have to be aware that you're restricted to certain times of the day. So for me to be able to run my own business, it gave me a lot of freedom because I'm making passive income. And yes, I do need to do meetings, but I have a lot of flexibility in terms of how I can organize my day. So it gave me the best experience. So starting your own business, difficult, can be done, requires a lot of discipline, commitment, but it's been a very rewarding experience for me. Another way to do it is to find a remote job or be an independent contractor. There are plenty of platforms out there. Upwork, for example, where you're able to make an income. And then another way to do it is, well, you travel, you find a place for 3 months and you get a job potentially as a diving instructor, at a cafe, as a bartender. But it's a different experience and it also limits you to be able to move around. So with the path that I took is being an entrepreneur and starting my own business, if I wanted to go somewhere tomorrow, I can. That gives me that freedom. So it gives you a lot of freedom because you can make your own hours. With remote work, that depends. If you work for a company, well, it's a little bit restricting. If you work as an independent contractor, well, then it gives you a lot more freedom as well. Now, in terms of the budget, it's actually quite amazing how much money you can save depending on the countries that you choose to travel and how you choose to travel. Now, in Australia, I would say that I would require about maybe $5,000 to $6,000 a month. Australian, which would be the equivalent of what, 4,000 USD. If I wanted to, I was able to cut that down by 50% and still travel. But if I wanted to, I could spend that whole 4,000. So it's a choice. The more you move, the more expensive it is. You have to pay for more flights. In the beginning, when we were traveling together, we were moving every week, every 3 days. It's extremely intense, and you can burn out. That's another thing to think about, not to burn out. And with the budget, again, it depends on how you choose. If you choose to eat locally, it's also part of the experience. You can save a lot of money, but if you chose to go to expensive hotels, well, it'll cost a lot of money. But the point is, if you're smart and you do your research, you're able to save a lot more money than living at home. And people think, oh, how can you afford it? Well, you have to think about it this way. You're not paying for rent at home. You have none of these expenses at home. But you have to pack your bags and say goodbye to home. And appreciate the fact that now your life as a digital nomad, this is your home. But all you have is your backpack. You don't have all of these objects that make it a home. But you don't need all of these objects. Because the saying goes, home is where the heart is.
When you decide to go somewhere, how do you decide where to go, how much time to spend there, where to stay, what kind of planning do you do before going somewhere? Do you plan all the details ahead of time? Or do you just show up and figure it out as you go, or somewhere in between? How do you do it?
There is a certain level of planning that needs to be done. So you do need to be aware that accommodation gets booked out. So I do recommend at least considering 2 to 3 months in advance where you want to be. It's nice to be spontaneous, but spontaneous comes at a price. If you book last minute, everything is more expensive. So generally speaking, I look at where I am, and then I like to go to Google Flights. And I like to see where are my options and what's the pricing. And sometimes I look at what is the cheapest flight, and I ask myself, well, okay, that could be interesting. Another thing could be, well, now what am I looking for? What experiences am I looking for? You have to ask yourself, would I like to spend time by the beach? Would I like to spend time in the mountains? Would I like to spend time in the city? And what kind of amenities do they have? So for me, it's important, as part of my traveling, it's always been important to have a gym, to maintain a healthy routine. And that comes with discipline as well, because it's interesting. When we were in Brazil and we met some remote workers, every day they just wanted to party and drink, but that's not sustainable. Maybe for the first 2 months, but after that, you start looking at, well, you want to live locally rather than just partying and traveling. So again, looking at Airbnbs, costs, what's your budget? What are you looking for? Do you need a 1-bedroom studio? What kind of amenities do you want to be in? Having restaurants close by. So for me, it's more of a logistical choice. Because as part of my experience, I like to go there and see what's happening. I don't like to plan too much, like, okay, I'm going to do a tour here, and a tour here, and a tour here. I don't like to make it that regimental. So that part, I leave that open. But the logistics, it's important to consider that at least 2 to 3 months in advance, just to help your budget.
Great. Let's say you get to a new destination, you've done all your planning. What is it like? How long do you stay? And what is a typical day like for you in that destination?
My experience is a little bit different now. In the beginning, we were traveling a lot together. But in the last year or two, my focus has shifted a lot where I'm very focused on my business. So for me, the priority is to have a space to work, a space to be able to cook, to be able to walk, explore the city, and to be able to meet people. Now, meeting people can be difficult sometimes. You can go to hostels, but I would recommend, if you're a digital nomad, to start looking at co-working spaces or finding digital nomad communities, people that are on a similar path to you, and for you to be able to then connect and share. Because you will also find that there's a lot of travelers that are only there for 3 months. So if you go to a hostel, for the most part, you'll meet someone, but then tomorrow they'll probably be gone. But I also like my personal space. I have no issue with being on my own, and I enjoy being on my own. I enjoy living simply. I wake up in the morning, I'll have a coffee, I'll start working. It's just like a normal day. I will take care of my emails, maybe at around 11, I'll go to the gym, cook some lunch, then I will do my meetings for the afternoon, and if there are any events, then maybe I might go out, or maybe I might do something during the day, maybe go to the beach. I've picked up now on salsa, and I enjoy doing that because that's also a very nice way to be able to meet people. But you have to have the right intention as well, and also you have to understand that in Latin America, salsa is part of the culture, and it's also a beautiful experience. So I've made that intention, and I enjoy that. But again, it's not that it can be easy to meet people, but it depends on where you're looking. And that's why I said in the beginning, set your intention. If you go to hostels, you'll meet backpackers that are traveling for 3 months that just want to party, and sure, that can be fun for a short period of time. But if you want to make it sustainable, you need to create your own community of digital nomads. And that's what we've created together over the last few years. So creating a community is important because it can get lonely. But it's also important to welcome that loneliness because it's part of the experience. So it's all about balance and not fear that experience of being by yourself, because it's very, very rewarding and it is part of the experience.
How about dating life?
That can be challenging. Again, you have to remember that there is a small cohort of people that choose to live your life, and not many people will understand that. Yes, potentially in Australia, in Europe, people will have that understanding, but as you travel through different countries, a lot of people may not have the same opportunities as you. So it may be difficult to connect, and that, I'm saying it with the best of intentions. It can be difficult. But I also enjoy dating and meeting local people, local women, and being able to understand their way of life, how they think. And I've been able to understand a lot more about women, and that's been a great experience. But unfortunately, at moments it can be difficult to sustain. As much as you want it to continue, you have to be mindful about who you choose to date as well, and whether that person is able to live your lifestyle, and again, what your intention is. If you would like a long-term relationship, that can be difficult. If you're having fun, well, we all like to have fun, and that's a lot easier. But if you're looking for something meaningful, then you have to be very, very mindful and meet people that understand your way of life. Again, it all depends on your intention, what you're looking for.
Do you think you will be continuing with this lifestyle for many years to come? How do you think your travels will evolve over the coming years?
Like I said, when it started, I was traveling every 2 weeks. But now I appreciate spending 3 to 6 months in one place. Again, now as a digital nomad, I'm not really a traveler, but I'm living my life in different countries. For example, I've spent a few months in Honduras. I have a very good friend of ours lives there, Oscar, and he was able to create a space for me that I could call home, and I really appreciated that. And you meet people, as you travel. I met him in Argentina, and he invited me to Honduras, and Honduras was the last place I ever expected to go to. Like I said, expect the unexpected. And that's the beauty of it as well. So we met, he invited me to Honduras, and I enjoyed my time there because I was able to build a community. I was dating, I met very good people, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. So I enjoyed spending 6 months there, and now I think to myself, well, yes, I can continue to be there, or potentially I will look for another place to spend 3 to 6 months. But 3 to 6 months is a good amount of time to also enjoy and live and understand that country and also build a community. Again, I believe that building a community is extremely important when you're a digital nomad. But now I found myself at a point where I kind of feel like I'm in no man's land, because I truly feel like a citizen of the world in the way that I was born in Australia. My family's Polish, but I don't feel like Australia is my home anymore. I don't feel like Poland is my home anymore. To be honest, I'm not sure where my home is anymore. So that is the conundrum that you can find yourself as being in a digital nomad. Let's say you're born in Sydney. That's your home, your family. They tell you this is your place. And so you believe that. They've sold you that that's what it is. And that's fine. And it's safe. It's comfortable. It's convenient. But your whole life is planned out. So you also have to ask yourself, what kind of personality are you? And this isn't for everyone. I've always been an adventurous person. I've always been a curious person. But I've always been comfortable being on my own. So there is something in that is important, that you have to become comfortable to be on your own, because the more you do this, the more you level up, the more you develop in life, because that is also part of the experience, that you're growing, you're developing, you're having all of these experiences, you're becoming a person of the world. And there aren't many people that make that choice, because it is scary. So now for me, it has become important to spend more time in one place so I can build that community. But also my priorities have changed, where I would really like to build my business, and I would like to continue to grow my financial independence. And I can do that anywhere in the world. So that is my focus. Before, my focus was experience life, discover myself, leave my home. But now I've come to a point where I feel very, very comfortable with who I am. I feel very proud of who I am. And that was because of the traveling. I would have never come to this point without the traveling, because it teaches you a lot about yourself. But like I said, my priorities have changed. I would like to add more value to my life and the people around me. And in order to do that, you have to commit more time.
Reflecting back on the last 3 years, what were some of the most memorable moments, your favorite memories, when you look back 20, 30 years from now and you will visit the last 3 years? Which moments would you talk about?
I would say that some of the most beautiful experiences have been with the women that I have met, and the spontaneous moments that we've had, and that has been extremely fun. For example, I met someone that I cared about a lot, and we met, and there was this spontaneous day where we decided to go to this town and go for a salsa night. And it was just random and spontaneous. It was not planned. It was a beautiful experience. It's something that I really enjoyed because it wasn't planned. So those unplanned moments, those people that you meet, they've been extremely beautiful. But then on the other side, I would say that one of the other most memorable moments have been that motorbike trip through India. You know, the four of us, Rambijay, Emiliano, yourself, and myself, we decided to hire motorbikes and travel across the country 1,000 kilometers through India from east coast to west coast. And just to put things into perspective, I had only gotten my license a year ago, and I hadn't ridden a motorbike in a year. I had no idea. I had very little experience, but I had a license, so I jumped on the bike and I knew how to change gears, and within 5 minutes we said, yep, let's hire the motorbike and we're going 1,000 kilometers across the country. And I think to myself, shit, not many people would make that choice, but it is memorable because you take a risk, and I think that's part of it. Take risks. You know, expect the unexpected. You meet someone. Yes, of course, you need to be mindful because it can be dangerous. But you learn to understand how people behave, and there is a certain level of trust that you need to build. And a part of that is building relationships. I've been able to build a lot of relationships, friendships, not just romantic relationships, but just connections. And those connections have led me to places and experiences that I never expected. And I think that's been part of it. You know, it's not the place that you go to, but it is the people that you meet that is the most rewarding.
You've talked a little bit about your favorite moments. What were some of the hardest moments over the last 3 years with this travel lifestyle?
That is a very, very good question. Let me think back upon it. Well, one, I do miss my mother and father. They're getting older. I'm 30, and you have to remember that time goes. Time is ticking. And sometimes it can be difficult to be far away from family, but that has also been an extremely important experience because I knew it's something I needed to do. Sometimes there have been moments where you're in relationships. You've tried to build something as a digital nomad, but unfortunately it doesn't work out just because of your circumstances. That has been difficult. What else? Sometimes you are lonely. Sometimes you are by yourself. You have to make money if you want to continue doing this. You know, it's not always just fun, parties, traveling. You do still need to understand that you have to continue making an income. So you have to be responsible. You have to be disciplined. But for me, even in the difficult experiences, I saw the beauty in it. But that's also my mentality. That's how I think. Now, there's always a learning experience in any there's always something to learn in any bad experience. But that's the way I look at life. So it's never been a challenge for me to go through these experiences because I welcome them. But on a logistical level, you know, things that you have to be mindful of, depending on the countries that you are, you know, you can be exposed to crime. It can be dangerous. So you have to be extremely mindful. The way you walk, the way you move, the way you carry yourself. It's something that you have to be mindful of. Luckily, I have had no bad experiences in terms of dangerous experiences. So I would say that for the most part, any bad experience that I've had has been a learning experience. I can't now, in this point in time, give you an example. So that has been my, I guess, approach to bad experiences, but it can be emotional. it can be an emotional in a sense that you're by yourself, you question everything. But it's a good thing because you should be questioning everything. You should be questioning, who am I? Where do I want to be? What do I want to do? Living in a bubble is very convenient because you don't question anything. Because everything is already served up for you and you think that, you know what, that's the way it is. Versus when you're traveling, there are no rules, there are no guidelines, there are no people telling you what to do. You are free to do what you want to do. And that can be difficult because having a lot of freedom also means a lot of responsibility. And some people don't know how to handle all of that freedom. It is easy to get a job, work 9 till 5, have a relationship, come home, what we all experience as daily life. But when you don't do that, and you have all this freedom, it can be overwhelming because then you have to ask yourself, what do I really want? What do I want to do next? And that can be difficult sometimes as well because you don't know. Versus when you live at home, you don't have to think about that. So I would say what can be challenging is making a decision and sticking to it. Because sometimes it may not work out. But it's okay. Nothing lasts forever. Let's say you go to a place, you've booked 3 months and you hate it. Well, then it's your decision in terms of what you want to do next. But again, you have the freedom. You can choose to be there or you can choose to leave. But sometimes you say, no, I made the wrong decision. But really there is no wrong decision.
Let's say there is somebody who hears about your experience and is very excited about jumping into this type of lifestyle. What advice do you have for them? How, or in other words, if you were to go back in time and give advice to yourself before embarking in this journey, what advice would you give yourself? What advice would you give to others to ensure that they're well prepared for it and to ensure that they have successful story in adopting it rather than burn out and go back home or, maybe not be prepared for it?
So there's a few things. How you pack, one. What you take with you. Also removing any expectation is a big one because I remember when I had all this, I was excited about traveling. I want to go see the world. But it is important to remove the expectation. But we'll get into that in a second. And there's a few other things. So in terms of packing, packing light is extremely important because you have so many things to think about when you travel. Where you're going to live, what you're going to eat, where you're going to work. There's many things. The visas, the documentation. In the beginning when we started traveling, it was COVID, so we had to do all these health exceptions, but luckily that's not required anymore. But again, paperwork, documentation. So traveling light is extremely important. And it also has a good benefit because you don't need to... When you buy flights, I would say that a big expense is having checked luggage. So if you're able to remove that expense, that is a bonus. That's just a kind of a little tip. But packing light is great because you have less things to think about. And also you realize you don't really need that much to think about, but you're also very mobile. Don't go with a suitcase. Don't drag a suitcase around the world with you because you're going to hate it. I have a 40-litre backpack. I don't really need much. I have a few compartments for my shirts, my shorts, my pants, one pair of shoes. You don't really need much. So pack light, I would recommend that. And then within your backpack, having what you need to work if you're working as a digital nomad for your laptop and all those pieces. So you don't really need much, but also you'll realize that when you pack light, it's very easy to find things and will know exactly where it is. So you don't waste time looking for things. You see so many people struggling with, carrying around a massive backpack, and it's just not necessary. So travel light. Now, the next thing, expectation. It's important to remove any expectation. And the reason being is that you're opening up to the world. You don't want to plan all of this. You want to see where it takes you. And again, if you have too much expectation, well then you may not have a good experience. Because sometimes a part of this is also having challenging moments. And that's part of that. So don't look at this as a holiday. Look at this as an experience to grow and learn about yourself. And it will be challenging, and there will be challenging moments, but in that there will be very rewarding moments. So I think that if you want to do this for a long period of time, you need to shift your mentality. You're not going on a holiday. You're not going for a couple of weeks to Mexico or Colombia to have fun and party. You're living a life as a digital nomad internationally.
How about in terms of budget? So before leaving, how much savings do you think one should have? How much money should one be earning every month to be able to adopt this lifestyle while potentially working remotely in order to be able to enjoy it?
Yeah.
What do you think is the minimum bar in terms of saving and in terms of monthly income to be able to live comfortably and enjoy this lifestyle?
It's good to have a safety net in terms of having some savings. Now, obviously more is better, but I would recommend around $10,000 to $20,000 is a good
Australian
net.
Or American dollars?
Australian.
Okay, so we're looking about have $10,000-$15,000 USD.
Yeah, something around that. It's a nice safety net. If you have 5, it is good as well. But again, you have to expect for the unexpected. Maybe you might not be making enough income. So you have to ask yourself, okay, what is my monthly budget? Let's stick to USD. We'll focus on USD. So let's say you're budgeting for about maybe $2,500 USD a month. So with $10,000 USD, you know that you can live without work for 4 months. But during that time, of course, you want to be making an income as well. So I think I would say $10,000 USD is a good safety net. It gives you about 3 to 4 months of room. But you do need to be making an income. Now, I would recommend an income of around a minimum income of $2,000 USD. A minimum. It's not going to be luxurious, but you'll be able to continue to live this lifestyle. 3,000 USD, it's very good. You can afford to budget to go to more restaurants, to go out, to really enjoy more events and amenities. And then up to 4,000, that's great. You can really enjoy yourself quite nicely. Maybe not 5-star hotels, but you have a lot more freedom to say, hey, you know what? I want to go to do this tour. I want to go hike a mountain. I have the budget for that. Again, it depends on the kind of choices that you want to do. You can live anywhere between 2,000 to 4,000 USD a month, but I would say 2,000 USD is the minimum bar, personally, for me. At least for what I'm looking for. I know there are plenty of people that can go a lot lower than that. But my situation is different. I run a business. I need to have a studio. I need to have an apartment where I can do my meetings. But if you're okay to live in a hostel, and for example, something like a Selena could be great. You could do a Selena package. There's a lot of digital nomads. They work remotely. But my situation is unique because I have business in Australia and I'm on the other side of the world. So my times are very, very different. So that's another way to do it as well. I know that they offer some packages for digital nomads, which is also a great opportunity. But I would say that is, from my perspective, a good budget and something to think about.
So in giving advice to other travelers who are considering this lifestyle, what specific advice would you give women versus men?
That is a good question. I would advise women to travel with, not necessarily a group, but with a travel buddy. Actually, in general, it's good to travel with a travel buddy. Even when we started traveling, we were traveling together. So regardless of man or woman, I would travel with a buddy. But as a woman, I would urge you to be extremely mindful about where you go and the times that you go. Luckily enough, I have never been in a dangerous situation, but I have heard stories of women being attacked, women being robbed, and that is the reality of it, that these things can happen. But again, it's about being extremely mindful and being aware of your surroundings. Don't be naive. You have to understand that when you live in a bubble, everything is safe. But when you leave that bubble, you are exposing yourself to certain dangers. And depending on the country that you go to, you have to understand that people have a different upbringing. They have different experiences. They have different struggles. And that will play on their actions and how they behave with you, because you're a foreigner. Because you come, maybe, I don't know, depending on where you come from, but you may have more opportunities than other people, and people will see that and they may want to take advantage of that, whether they hustle you, whether they try and rip you off, whether you're being robbed. One advice I would say is never walk on a street with your phone out. And also I would advise women to travel with someone. You never know what might happen. And when you might find yourself in a difficult situation. Luckily I have not had that experience, but as sad as it is, I have a feeling it's because I am a man. And I can see, I go to the gym. I consider myself to be stronger than the average. I feel very confident in who I am, and I also project a certain body language when I travel that, look, I'm not the easiest target, so don't make yourself an easy target. Because there are dangers out there that you need to be aware of, especially as a woman, because there are certain people out there that unfortunately don't have the best of intentions.
So as you travel around, how do you manage to maintain a healthy lifestyle? How do you deal with being sick at times? What advice do you give others in order to maintain a certain healthy lifestyle?
So for me, going to the gym has been extremely important. Being active is extremely important. I would say that is the foundation for maintaining this lifestyle, and I also believe it's the foundation for maintaining a good life. Exercise is it's about, if you're working all day, you need to break the day, and exercise is a part of that. I dedicate about 4 days a week, maybe 5 days a week, to exercise for at least 1 hour, whether it's going to the gym. Personally, I don't really like running anymore, but you can do other activities. So being active is extremely important. Eating healthy, in the beginning, I was eating street food, I was going out, and it's great. It tastes good, food's cheap. But after a while, it can be a little bit too much. So cooking is extremely important to maintain that healthy lifestyle. But again, that's when after a couple of months, in the beginning you go, you travel, you have fun, you go out, you meet people. But now after 3 to 6 months, maybe even a year, you start to realize that it's not sustainable. So that's why you need to have a budget of about $2,500 USD so that you can have a home, so you can cook, so you can have your personal space. So cooking is it's something that I've now do a lot more of, and I find it to be very beneficial for me. You save money, and it maintains a healthy lifestyle. Another thing is also to socialize, to find the right circles, to be able to meet the right people. Whether you go to work within a co-working space, you connect with other digital nomads, whether you join different groups, But for me, I didn't mind being lonely, and I didn't mind being by myself. So I kind of threw myself in the deep end into a city where I had no idea and I didn't know anyone. And if I can be perfectly honest, A lot of the people that I met were through the dates that I went on, and I enjoyed that experience because I am also limited for time. I have to work a lot, and I have a business to run. So having that balance is extremely important. Making those connections. And now when it comes to dating, I mean actually building connections and building relationships and adding value. I'm not talking about one night stands. Personally, I enjoy meeting different women and learning to understand them. I enjoy that experience, so that's how I was able to make connections. And for me, that has been an extremely valuable experience, and I've grown a lot from that. And I can be honest in saying that I enjoyed doing that, but I had the right intentions in doing that. For me, it was about building trust with people, and that is very, very important, to build trust. Because then, once you go past that, it's amazing how many beautiful experiences you can have with another person if you're able to build trust. And you also have to remember that you're a foreigner coming from another country, so people may look at you differently. So how you behave is how people will treat you. Treat people how you want to be treated. It's very easy to get lost, but then you'll find yourself being very empty if you do things with different disrespect. So I do urge that. Another thing in terms of a healthy lifestyle, exercise, food, balance, socializing, but also exploring, getting out of your office. The beautiful thing about traveling is that, or being a digital nomad, is that you're living your life in another country. Well, you can just walk out the door and you can explore a new city, walk down a street, sit down at a cafe, at a restaurant. You never know who you're going to meet, who you're going to start talking to. And those moments are really nice because they're so spontaneous, it's not planned. And so also putting yourself out there and not being afraid of just saying hello, smiling, being open, and creating a space of trust. And you can meet a lot of amazing people that way as well. I've met people at cafes, at certain people, just by being open and just saying, hey, hello, there's nothing wrong with that. You don't know this person, you have no idea who that person is, you've never met them in your life, and you may never meet them again, but you're breaking this barrier that is really, really nice of insecure. Maybe it might be insecurity, maybe you might be nervous, whatever it may be. Maybe and you don't have. There's no agenda. It's just about making a connection, and people appreciate that. Also, the countries that you choose does have an effect, because some places, some countries are extremely touristic, and so unfortunately, the people will treat you like a tourist, and they will look at you like a dollar sign. And personally, I don't like that. So I look for places where there isn't a high level of tourism, because the people and the local will welcome you differently, and they will treat you differently, and that is also a nice experience. You meet somebody that has a completely different life than you hear their story, you share their story, and that is a beautiful exchange. So one, I think being open, going back to who I was before I started traveling, I was quite shy. I didn't have a high self-esteem. I didn't feel very confident because of my upbringing, and that was my personal challenge. But through traveling, I was able to overcome that, because you're by yourself. You have no choice but to open up and say hello and get to know somebody. And that is extremely important. So building those connections. But also understanding that through this experience, some people may become very close friends, and some people may only be there for a short period of time. And that's okay. It's about letting go. I think, going back to what was difficult, I think letting go of relationships and people that unfortunately, as much as I love them, they sometimes things just don't last. And sometimes people just come and go, and you have to learn to live with that.
So just for fun, let's fast forward 5 years.
Yeah.
Where is Pablito? Where does he live? What does his life look like? And then hopefully 5 years from now we can watch this little segment again and see how far or how close you got to where you expect to be.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I've spent a lot of time on my own. So building a real connection for me is extremely important. When you have this life, it is nice to be able to share it with someone that understands you and someone that shares the same values. And that's something that I would like. But also, I would like to have, let's say, certain communities around the world where I could spend maybe 3 to 6 months. So now I look at it more long term, because I am no longer interested in moving 1 week to another, to another, to another. It can be extremely tiring. And, you meeting a lot of people, there's a lot of emotions, there's so many things happening. I would like to, I wouldn't say settle down, but I would like to create more permanent locations that I can come back to. I will continue traveling for the rest of my life, and I know that that's who I am. It's also part of my work. I need to travel. I need to go to different events. I need to go to different conferences. I have family in Poland. I have family in Australia, so I will continue to travel. But I think that finding a location where you can call a home, for me, is something that I would like. But it doesn't mean I'm going to spend like 5 years living there. I mean having certain hubs. So for example, I've always enjoyed my time in Latin America. So I would like to spend 3 to 6 months of the year in Latin America. I would like to spend a few months maybe in Poland if I can, or a few months in Australia to spend time with my family. And then potentially spending maybe a few months in parts of Asia. But I see myself, rather than moving every month, spending 6 months in one location. But who's to say what happens in the next 5 years? Anything is possible. But at this point, that's how I see it.
Anything is possible. Is there anything else you want to share? Any advice you want to give others before we wrap up?
Well, I would like to say that from everything that you've heard, I've given you my perspective, how I have felt. And for me, it has been the best experience of my life. And I would never go back. I would never change anything, because I did what I wanted to do. And it's hard to, it's interesting to say, before I started traveling, I woke up in the morning thinking, fuck, what am I doing with my life? Now I know exactly who I am, what I want. And it's very, very clear to me. And I have been never happier and never more and so content with the choices that I've made in my life. And something that has driven me is, I thought to myself when I was older, well, if I'm on my deathbed, you have to ask yourself, this life will go very, very quick. I'm already 30. Like, the last 5 years have gone quick. And you have to ask yourself, on your deathbed, how did you want to live your life? And for me, I knew how I wanted to be my life. So yes, there's always going to be challenges, but life is full of challenges. There's plenty of challenges in traveling. But you have to really ask yourself, in 5, 10, 20 years' time, what kind of experiences did you want? And what kind of experiences are important to you? And this has been extremely, extremely important. I have learned so much about myself. I've grown so much I've grown so much. And so that is something that is good to take away. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. But because it's not easy, that's what makes it so rewarding. And it's the challenge that makes it so rewarding. going back to where you were and who you've become, that is what is rewarding. But learn to enjoy the pain that comes with it. Learn to enjoy the challenge that comes with it. You can choose to step out of your bubble and become the best version of yourself, or you can choose to stay in that bubble and live a very safe and secure life, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's great, but the choice is yours.
Well, Pablito, thank you for taking the time to sit down and chat. It's been fun hanging out together here in Colombia, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation as well. If you like it, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, and until next time, take care.